Welcome back to the shop, you guys. If you've been following along with me in the previous installments of this bow build, this is pretty much where we left off. It was with our bow blank. And in this particular instance, it is a bamboo and ipe reflex deflex that's actually got quite a bit more reflex than it does deflex. And so there's going to be it's going to be a pretty snappy bow in terms of draw weight and etc. So we've got a real good starting point here. The width on this bow is really pretty thin just to even get started. It is 1 3/16 inches wide at its widest point. So small dimensions and I think a relatively long length. I think it's like 64 inches long. So and I'll correct that if I'm wrong about that. So in any event, we're starting close to our final dimensions without ever having actually put any scrapers or rasps or anything to this bow yet. And so that's where we're starting at now. For you guys that maybe don't have a thickness sander or drum sander or struggle with the tillering of bamboo or don't have access to bamboo or some of the materials that we have talked about, I make this particular product available on my website. And so if you're interested in following along from this build starting from here, because this is basically a starting point, visit my website. It's meadowlarkag.com. I'll put it, it'll probably show up on the screen here when I actually edit this video. You can go on there and see what I have to offer and contact me, and if you would like, I can make you one of these. But in any event, we are going to go about tillering this bow now, and I use the process that Dean Torges teaches in his book, Hunting the Osage Bow. There is no Osage in this bow, but the tillering process remains the same, and what he teaches is what he calls a faceted tillering process. Okay guys, so I just wanted to lend a little more clear picture of what I was talking about when I was talking about the faceted process of tillering that Dean Torges puts in his book. So this is his book, Hunting the Osage Bow. You can see it right down here. So when we talk about putting a peak in, this is kind of what I was talking about. And we're not going to have a peak. This is going to be more representative of what we'll have in terms of a cross section and what in our build right here. And so when you start working on this particular corner here, this works weight. When you work on this particular corner here, this works tiller. All the while removing material from the belly. But out on the extreme edge here, weight more towards the center, and even straight on the center is going to give you more tiller implications. And so you can see in that the last diagram. So if you're looking at this with me, if you take material off on what is 1A or 2B, that's removing weight. If you're removing material on A3 or B3, you are now affecting tiller. Okay, and so C4 and D4 is just rounding out the remainder of the limb. That will also affect weight to some degree. So when you start working on the extreme edges, you're working on weight, and when you start working more along the wide edge of your belly, you're dealing with tiller. So that is the tillering process as described by Dean Torges, and this is the book. This is the book that we're pulling this from. How you choose to remove material is really up to you. My process has pretty much been, I think I've been pretty straightforward talking about how I use power tools where I can. I'm going to go ahead and put a chamfered edge on all my limb corners here, and I'm going to use my belt sander to do it. It makes very short work of it, so if this is how you choose to do it, you need to be very, very careful and precise. Well, not really precise, but very attentive to removing the wood. And I'll go ahead and remove it up the fades as well. So just try and blend everything all together. So here we go. Okay, so I don't know if you can really see it, but we're taking and just put these edges on here, so we now have surfaces with which to work upon to get work tiller or work weight. And so a lot of the initial portions of this is going to be working the weight because, as I mentioned, this bow is really quite stiff to start with. So okay guys, I'm trying to focus in quite a bit on the limb here of the bow. I'm going to take after it with a my Nicholson file again, right here, my handy file. I'll take after it with the double cut side versus the single cut, but we'll go clean up these edges, and really what I want to do is get both the belly surface and those two chamfered edges smoothed out with my file. The reason we're working the file is to ensure that we get any kind of grit or anything that came from the sandpaper of the belt sander out of there. We don't want that getting hung up on our card scraper, so that's a major consideration with our tools. So always I finish up with my handy file. Now we want to get a nice long strokes so that we're not digging out into one particular area. Always work as best you can along the length of your bow, and be mindful that you're getting even removal. Remember that we're already tapered from handle to tip, so we don't have to work too much on the taper. Right now we're just working on smoothing it out. So we're going to work on that for a little while, just kind of get everything smoothed out, and then we'll start exercising her. Okay guys, so one of the most valuable tools for tillering is a card scraper, just like this. I've dressed up the edge again to get started on here. I'm going to kind of go over the belly, and you'll be able to see how the surface of this thing starts to change once we put the scraper to it. So I'll try and keep a clear view for you and just take a few wipes off of this bow. So I think you can probably tell from before to after, just even after taking a few of those swipes with the card scraper, that surface is getting to be almost a polished appearance, where it's reflecting the shop light now versus having that roughed surface from the sander. Now we'll continue along here until I get a good floor tiller and I'm feeling comfortable about the weight. Really what we want to do is reduce material in floor tiller until we get it to where we know that we're in the ballpark of our finished bow. So we're all pretty familiar with what a 50-pound bow feels like if you were to floor tiller a finished 50-pound bow. That's what we're going to do, is try to come in just a little above that, right? So we don't want to miss our target weight, but we're going to floor tiller this to probably like a 60-pound bow at floor tiller, and that way we know we're not overstressing our limbs in any way, and then we can really get on with the fine tillering without having to do a ton of work to get to our finished product. So everything is about each step landing us as close to our finish line as we possibly can without going over. So that's kind of the methodology in this build. So I'm going to keep working on some removal, and if I come across anything of note, I will record that and show you what I got going on. Alright guys, so I think I've mentioned a couple times here during the course of this build that this particular blank is particularly strong. So I am going to have a lot of wood removal to do to get us into that 50-pound range, which is pretty much where I shoot for most of my bows, 50-55 pounds, maybe 60 on the upper edge as a typical build. So what I've done now, and I'm not even in the ballpark of like a 60-pound bow. This is really heavy. So when you find yourself in a position with a blank like this where your weight is just a little out of the ballpark like this, understanding that removing material off of these edges is going to have a larger effect on weight than it will on tiller, and we can do some pretty gross removal that's going to take a lot of weight off without throwing our tiller into all kinds of weird fanatical stages, right? So the more we work the belly, the more the opportunity to have problems with our tiller, and what we want to do is spend as little time on the belly as possible to get the best tiller. And so, you know, understanding that we can remove wood one of two ways, off the belly or off the edge. And so this is where I'll employ some side tillering to get our bow into weight. It might be difficult to see. You can kind of see it right here. I have pencil lines on either side of the bamboo. I'll kind of show you how I do that. So if you hold your pencil, and you use your finger as a guide, and that pencil on the board, and you just strike a line down its length. You just ride it down its length. Now, of course, you want to make sure that you've run a file along that edge before you run your finger. You know, again, try and save yourself from any kind of splinters. But what I'll do now is I'll go gross removal. So we can do it one of two ways. We can take a file to this. The reason that I strike a line and don't just take a number of wipes, I have done that before where I'll take 20 wipes off of one edge and 20 wipes off the other, where I dish out the top part of the limb up here and then dish out the bottom part of this one over here. The bend of the limb is all over the place and not straight, and then you spend the final tillering stages just trying to get your limb tips to match up. Don't like to mess with that either. So what we're going to do is just a little bit of removal. I mean, we haven't even strung it, so we don't even know exactly how close our limb tips are under a string, you know, with a twist or anything. But I'm going to go ahead and take this to the belt sander, and I'm just going to sand directly down on the edges to that pencil line. Here again, we want to try and maintain that ratio of belly to bamboo wood. So we want that bamboo to not occupy too much of that limb thickness. When it becomes all bamboo and no ipe, the ipe will crush under the strain of the bamboo. And same with hickory or any other wood for that matter. And that's where you start running into a lot of crystalline along your belly. So truthfully, you want the belly to be as thick front to back as you can, and work your weight on your sides. So I'm gonna take that down. Once I take that down on the sander, I'll take the file to it again, and then also take the card scraper to it one more time just to smooth everything out, and then we continue working from there. Okay guys, so I've ground down to my lines, or sanded down to my lines here on my back, and there's just little remnants of pencil line just right on the edges. So, and as you get a little closer to the grip, and so when you do that, you got to reestablish the chamfer that we put into the belly. Okay, so we'll do a little work on the side, and then we regrind in this chamfer. So you can kind of see where I have reground those corners here to reestablish our faceted tillering. I don't know, just the faceted pieces of the limb so that we can tiller our bow properly. I will continue that process, and typically I continue that process on one of these bows where I will side tiller. I'll take to a pencil line off on the edges here, and then reestablish the peaks and clean everything up with a file. Maybe take a card scraper to it just to kind of clean things up, and then check a floor tiller and see how close we are to the weight. If we're still a long ways off, I'll do it again. I'll put a new line on my back, I'll grind down to that pencil line, and then reestablish the chamfer on either side of the limb and check it again. Now, as you start getting a little thinner and a little thinner, it starts taking some material out of the belly piece here, and that's just a natural progression of things, and so that's okay. But what we want to do is get ourselves close to weight and then tiller. So we want to get ourselves, if I want a 50-pound bow, we'll want to get it to where it's floor tillering like a 60-pound bow or so. Right? Because you can expect during the exercising of the bow, you're going to lose some weight anyway, and same with the tillering. But we don't want to be chasing weight and tiller simultaneously. When you're trying to chase them both, you lose one or the other. And so we're going to get it real close to weight, and then we'll focus on tiller and not have to worry so much about getting a proper tiller and then getting it down to weight. I prefer to come in weight first and then tiller it home. So here we go. I'm going to clean this up, and I'm just going to repeat the process. If I'm way out in the sticks in terms of weight, I'll take a little more off my sides, reestablish my chamfer, clean everything up, and floor tiller it, and repeat. And I'll just keep taking wood off that way, and once we get close, then we'll turn our sights to tillering. Here we are, guys. The bow is basically floor tillering at a weight that I think is going to be just about right. It feels like a heavy 60-pound bow at floor tiller. So we're going to give up a little bit of weight just in exercising this bow, and then some weight in tillering it. So this is right at the sweet spot. So it feels like a heavy 60-pound, 65-pound bow when I'm pressing it while I'm on the floor. I want to kind of try and get a peek at the facets here. So here's that faceted tillering process, and actually my other limb might be a little more pronounced than that one. Let's try this. Alright, so if you look down the length here we go. You can see that the center facet. There's a corner facet, our other corner facet, our edge. Okay, so now when we go about tillering this bow, we're going to be tillering it right on this facet here. Let's see if I can't get this to sit still. Right on this facet. Alright, so we're no longer going to be working these edges so much. We're going to basically meld this belly facet into the rest of the contour of that limb, on the cross section of the limb. Once it's completed, and to the casual observer, that belly will be all but flat. Okay, and what it'll look like is a flat belly that's just been rounded on its edges, like any bow would be, rounded on its edges. And it performs like a flat belly. It's not like, it is. It'll be a flat-bellied bow, a flat American flat bow, just like it's described. But we're not going to be chasing weight while we chase tiller. So we are basically in our weight range, very close anyway. So if we do have to do any weight reduction, it's going to be minor, not enough to throw off our tiller. And then we'll know how to remove that wood to get to weight. We'll be removing it out here and here, while tiller is relegated to this surface right here. And we don't have to worry about missing our weight or anything like that. The other part of this too is in getting that close to our weight right out of the gate, we help ensure that we do not overstrain our limbs, right? So at no point is this bow pulling. I mean, it's not even going to be strung at a weight over about 60 or 65. Even if it finishes at 50 or 55, we're not overstraining it like it's a 120-pound bow and we're putting a string on it and taking weight off as we go. It's already close to its finished dimensions, which gives it gives it ample opportunity to settle into its tiller. It's going to react quicker. It's going to stay better. You're not going to get these little hidden tillering mistakes that manifest themselves after a couple shots. It's very, very regimented, and the results are really pretty reliable. So here we are. I'm going to put some string grooves in. So I'll put in some string knocks right up here. Those knocks will be temporary, as I mentioned, because we're going to go back before everything's finished up, and we're going to put some overlays on here. But we're not going to put overlays on until we know that our tips are the right or finished width, etc. So going to put in those knocks, and I will be back. Okay guys, I realize that there's a lot of busyness in the background there, and I apologize for that, but I've got the bow blank now on a long string on a tillering tree here to kind of show the initial bend that we have. It's pulling far enough to show that it can be strung, so it's pretty much at like a brace height bend. So the next step from here is to go ahead and put it on a shorter string. We'll bring it to brace height and kind of take another look at the tiller, because when you tiller with the long string, you're not getting an accurate picture of the bend of the limbs. We'll move on from there and put a short string on it, or a shorter string, try and get it to brace height, and look at the tiller from that point. Okay, here we are at the first string. A couple things to look at. We want to make sure that we're running tip to tip pretty good, bisecting limbs, and he seems to be behaving pretty well in terms of twist. You can see that the bend is relatively even. We'll take a little more critical eye to that bend here when we get started on the whole tillering process. But overall, at the moment, pretty happy with the way the first stringing has gone. It took a little bit of effort to get that thing strung, so it is definitely a heavy bow still. What we're going to do now is we'll let this bow sit strung. So that is its purpose in life right now, is to find itself. And so we'll leave her strung just like this, and let's see if I can get this. Maybe I didn't open it far enough. Oh yeah, I did. See what we get in terms of any change in that tiller. So we've got our initial bend. We're going to leave it strung for half an hour now. And in that half an hour, while the bellywood compresses and kind of finds its home and gives us our initial fingerprint of where we are in terms of tiller, it's going to probably lose somewhere in the neighborhood of 3 to 5 pounds of weight. This again is addressed in Dean Torges' book as far as the tillering process. The initial string up, and we call it sweating out the bow. So we're going to sweat a little bit of weight off this thing, and it's going to learn its initial tiller, and then we will address its final tiller from this point. This is going to be the end of this video. We will chase all of the final tillering with the next episode.